Good morning. My name is Stephen Kelly. I'm Egyptian by birth, Scottish, Irish by name and adoption, and American by citizenship. So, and I have some Turkish in me as well. All right, somebody seems to be in favor of that. So, in some sense, I'm a mutt. Hodgepodge of many things. I lived 22 years in Egypt, 14 and a half years in England, southern England, and 4 years in Spain, and the rest of my life in America. So I bring a lot of cultural experiences, but I've also been a Christian more than some of you, at least age-wise. I've been a Christian for 48 years. And it's been a privilege. So what I'm teaching you today is more of the experience of 35, 40 years in the Lord. I actually used to live in Grand Rapids here, and we moved from here. I went to Calvin Seminary, a little bit in Calvin College and Calvin Seminary, graduated in 1989, and I started a community center in Dearborn, Michigan, and it's still going till now. So I have a lot tied into Michigan, ministry-wise. I've not taught this subject in English. I have taught it in Arabic a few times, but not in English. So I don't have the outline, so I'm going to be translating from the Arabic in front of me into English. And I had it in the computer, and I lost my computer last weekend in Atlanta. So there's been a lot of upheaval in the last week for me, but I'm used to that. When you get involved in this kind of ministry, the attacks come in frequently in so many different ways. But I have to tell you, one of the things that I really enjoyed was last month, the last week of April. I've been involved in a conference about 178 all BMBs. I use the term BMB, believers of Muslim backgrounds. I know they use a different term here, and there's also MBB, and I don't want to confuse you in all these terminologies. I coined the BMB because we are believers first, who happen to be from some kind of background. Why I'm not saying the word Christian? Because Christianity has kind of bloody history in different areas of the world, and also has some bad history. So we don't want to start with all the issues. That's the stumbling block. But I'd rather say I follow Christ. That's easier for me than having to say, Christian and get involved with everything else. But in the conference, all the 178 people, well, not all, 7 of them were Muslims but interested to listen. And they've been in Bible study, but they haven't made a commitment. And the rest were converts. The worship leaders were also BMBs. And the people who ran the conference were BMBs. And those who spoke in the conference were BMBs. For me, that's been a dream of 30 years to find the new church. I don't know if you heard this or not. You might not agree with it or disagree, but that's a different. There's a new denomination that includes all the BMBs around the world, and it's been recognized by all the historical and international churches, and includes the Persians and the Arabs and other Muslims from every. So now it's a reality. It's a new church. And just to give you, we have more BMBs in Egypt than the historical evangelical church, which is 500,000. Okay, so we are in a new generation where the BMB church is growing by leaps and bounds. I can't tell you numbers, folks. I hear 5 million, 8 million, 15 million. None of us can really prove it, and I don't know how statistically that we can prove how many are existing. But I could tell you, every time I go back to North Africa and the Middle East, I meet more people and new people. So in some sense, the problem we have now is not, for a long time we were wondering, we want to bring the people to Christ. Now we have so many of them coming out of our ears. What do we do with them? That's a healthy problem. That's not a bad problem. It's a healthy problem. And the problem I have seen is people growing up in Christ. Many of the BMBs, their testimony is their Christian life. You understand what I'm saying? They have not grown. They can only share their testimony, and that's it. And that's problematic because they haven't grown. And I've met people, I've met people just a couple of years ago. I run a school in Europe, in Southern Europe, to train Muslim convert leaders. And in that school, I met a couple of ladies who are BMBs for 4 years, and they go to a Western church in Europe. For 4 years, they did not know, or they did not have down a Bible, Old Testament and New Testament. They could not find the books in the Bible. And it's an evangelical church in Europe. So I had another BMB, so she helped the two ladies to download the Bible on their phone and then teach them what's Old Testament, what's New Testament, how to get to the Bible. 4 years. It is problematic for me that people get in a church for 4 years and they're not discipled. And I have to tell you, the American church does not know how to disciple either, or the European church. We have a lot of knowledge, but we're not discipled. And I will get into some of that, some of the basics of discipleship. And I come from a model that is different. In the West, we say, this is evangelism. When we're done with that, they give their life to the Lord, and this is discipleship. When it's done with that, you do this, and when it's done with that, you do this. And we separate all these. I work with a continuum as a circle. And I actually think that discipleship does not start when after the person gives their lives to the Lord. It actually precedes that. Because many of us who come from this background have questions. We have not even made a decision for the Lord yet, but we have plenty of questions. So you could spend a year or two. It took me 3 years researching and searching for Christ and understanding the Scripture. And after 3 years, I finally made the decision. But during those 3 years, I have some people who are answering questions. We actually opened the library, their library, for me to look at books and to compare and to read. One part of me says, I don't know my religion too well, so I better learn it better. That way I could stand against the tide of Christianity. And I did that as well. So this is why I call discipleship, because I have a lot of questions. I have not followed the Lord yet, but I still have some questions. So I do believe that discipleship begins when you meet the person and you start to spend time with them. Okay? So that's why I know it's not a proper discipleship as people think, but as long as you're spending time with people before they make a decision to follow the Lord, and then they make a decision to follow the Lord, that's part of discipleship. I don't know if some of you know this. In Egypt, we have a pottery. It's called ulla. You put water in it, and you put it in the window, and it cools off naturally. You don't need a refrigeration or anything. And to be able to, so I call the life is like this kind of pottery, and you have a crack in it, and the crack gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and finally the whole pottery cracks. Working with believers, it takes a long time, folks. And the cracks are there, but then they increase and they increase, and finally, I've been in the Lord, as I said, 48 years. The problem I still have some superstitious things that I'm still carrying from the old days, And I says, where does that come from? For crying out loud, I've been a Christian for so many years. So when my left hand scratches, I'm getting some money. That's superstition. It's not even in the Bible. I don't think it's even in the other religion, by the way. But that's the cultural superstition. Now, maybe we're weird, but you're weird too, by the way. Touch wood. Where does that come from? What is that? Cross your fingers to be protected. All of these are superstitions that we are facing, and we carry it from our culture, and we carry with us. So sometimes, no matter how long you've been in the Lord, you still carry some things with you. I tell you, after 19 years that I've been with the Lord, and it was the first time to come back from the U.S., and I was in Jordan. In Jordan, you have the call to prayer only. All the mosques have the same call. It's through the radio. So it's not like in Egypt, you have 200,000 calls to prayer from every direction around you. And believe it or not, after 19 years, I woke up and I said, I'm going to pray. Okay. I've been a Christian for 19 years. I'm a minister, by the way. And automatically, I set up to pray. Then you can see the effect of the culture in you. And I kind of said, it's really in the DNA. And it takes years and years to be able to shed those things. I did not pray, but I actually automatically I stood up and I was ready to pray. And then I have to rationalize and think about it. So some of these things we carry with us throughout the years. And we need to understand it. That's what we call the DNA that you have it in, but we also have some other issues that we carry with us sociologically, culturally, in other ways. I could tell you if you need marriage issues, I had my share fights with my wife on cultural problems. Not even personal problem, cultural problem. And I tell you, the first time I fought with my wife, I called my mother-in-law because in Egypt when we fight, I call her parents, so they tell her, listen to your husband, and she will listen to me. So I did the same. I called my mother-in-law, look at what your daughter is doing. She says, I don't care, that's your problem. Wait a minute. I'm not used to this. You're supposed to go talk to your daughter and tell her to listen to her husband and be good. So these are some of the cultural things. Even after you're married and a Christian for many years, you carry some of these issues. There are cultural issues. So discipleship, as we define it, it's not just the head knowledge, folks, that we know the Scripture. And this is my problem with a lot of seminaries in America now, that we address the head, but we have a moral crisis among pastors and Christian workers. They're not living what they know. They are great preachers, good teachers, but living it is becoming a problem. It is a holistic approach, folks. It's not that I sit with them and teach them the Bible. I sit with them, and yesterday they were talking in one of the seminars about food. Did you know that food is a biblical thing? Hospitality is a biblical thing, by the way. It's a gift. How can you witness to people or talk to people and disciple people and not spend time with them eating in their home? Now, let me go back to Jesus. What did Jesus do? He was in a lot of social activities. Some of you remember making, the water into wine. That was one of the things. You have other things that he's done. When he had the mother-in-law, Peter, that he went to heal. So he healed people. He worked with people. He lived with people. And I tell you, he suffered with his disciples for 3 years. I did a talk about Peter. I call him the Muslim. Of course, Islam came 600 years after Christianity. I understand that. I'm not that dummy. So it was 600 years after. But the way he reacted was a Middle Eastern viability and Middle Eastern obnoxiousness, if you want to call it. I could say that. That's not racist, okay? Because I am one. So this is part of the issue but if you see the things that Jesus suffered with him, Peter before the resurrection was a different Peter than the one after the resurrection. The one who wrote 1st and 2nd Peter is quite different than the Peter with Christ. You remember? The shenanigan that he pulled. Nah, that's a good Irish name, Irish expression. What he pulled for Jesus, I could have pulled my hair out from Peter. And Jesus could have given up on him, but he spent the time and the energy and taught him, accepted also his weakness, and followed along with him till we have Peter, do you love the people? Okay? And people finally got, and by the way, he wanted to be crucified. And he ended up being crucified. Not at that time, but it was later on. And that's part of the things that when we talk about discipleship, it is not just a Bible study that we give them the basics of the faith. It is living with them. Last week, it's been a privilege for me. Is this all recorded publicly, I guess? I helped somebody to go from one country to the other because they were forcing her to get married by force to different people. And finally, it took 2 years to finally work it out and get her out. Is this part of discipleship? Yes. Because we are with them even when they have struggles and when they need to be helped. You know, people sometimes just go and teach in the Bible and go home and you have your life and I have my life. That is not what Jesus did. Jesus spent 3 years in all the spheres of life with the disciple. He ate with them. He struggled with them. He prayed for them. He saw how shallow sometimes they are. He saw some of them were feisty like Thomas. I want to see. I don't believe it. Those are the scientists of you. You know, you can't believe it till you prove it, till you touch it. And many of you younger generation, you can't go to mission till you go to the place and see the people and fall in love with them. And then you say, yeah, this is what we want to do. In our generation, there's some people who've never been in one country, but the Lord told them to go, and they've never been there before. They hopped on the ship for 3 months till they got there. That's the old generation. This generation is a little bit different. So you really have to be part of the people in all the spheres. Like in the school when we train the leaders, by the way, one of the problems that we've seen in discipleship, the believers are so not rigid, but know exactly what they need to do as a Muslim. Do you know when to pray, how many times, when to fast, and how many times, and during the day, and how to go to the pilgrims? Everything is nicely prescribed systematically for them to fulfill what is needed. Then they become a Christian, folks. What happened? They become chaotic. You can pray anytime. You can fast anytime. You can do this when you want to, wherever you want to. And their discipline is gone. And it's problematic because then they don't have a Christian disciplined life. We kind of go away from that when we become, especially evangelical. At least the Catholics and the Orthodox, Coptic Orthodox, have some systematic things. We evangelicals are free from everything. I'm sorry to say. So what we do with them, we actually spend time with them and we do spiritual formation. We give them into a discipline of regular prayer, fasting, silent. I'm kind of involved in this kind of movement since I'm also Egyptian, and the Desert Fathers, have some of these discipline. And we help them to be disciplined, to work on all of these discipline, to nurture them, and to deal with it. So for us, it's a time we spend with them. You won't believe. We teach them in 10 days, and then they go back. But the time you spend on WhatsApp, on Signal, on Zoom, in all kinds of media, where you spend time with them, they have questions, they have issues. Sometimes I've flown from the U.S. to Europe to work on a marriage issue of believers. Okay? So this is all part of discipleship and leadership training. Is to be part of their life. You know, sometimes it's not just 3 years like Jesus did, by the way. Sometimes 10 years that you're involved. Some people still need some help, still take a longer time to deal with the issues. So it is really a holistic approach. Now, another thing, and I don't think you ever thought about part of discipleship to be a matchmaker. Have you heard about that, matchmaker? Casamentero, for those of you who speak Spanish. I work as a matchmaker. One of the major issues that we have, that women cannot marry except a Muslim. So what do we do with that? They have no choice. If they don't get married or find someone, then their family marries them, gets them someone. Their cousins, somebody, and so on. Especially if they smell the infidelity. Then they get urged, no, we got to get them married so we can cut them off from that. So we do conferences to bring in single people to come together. Hopefully they will get to know each other. And I have 5. I am not married to 5. I married 5. And that's part of the basic need, folks. I'm working number 6 now. But, you know, it's a basic need, and it frees the women from all the cultural pressure and the family pressure on them. Is this part of discipleship? Yes. If I am a father and I have daughters and I want them to get married, then I try to find a husband. I know I'm an old generation. You young people now believe in love and all kinds of things, and, you know, they have to fall in love, but you end up falling out of love as well. And that's the problem. But for us, it is a commitment. It's not just because, you know, emotionally I'm in love, wonderful. But after 40 years of marriage, like me, there's not that much love left, is there? Just kidding. But there's commitment. There's sometimes in your life where you were not emotionally part of it. You were angry. You had all kinds of issues. But it takes time. It takes commitment. I just taught a group in whatever Arabic country, 37. They are Yemenis refugees. They've never been taught about what is a biblical marriage. They are coming with all kinds of issues, being abused, being married when they are 13 years old, and then sold to another person for marriage, from Yemen to Saudi Arabia. Their kids, and their kids having kids. Some of them had to cause a divorce, or what we call khulla in our part of the world. They snap themselves out of the marriage. Like when you take a bone and you pull your arm out, that's what's called the Arabic word for it in the Sharia law. They do that, but they end up with nothing. But at least they had the freedom to get out. Some of them have a new baby that was born, and the husband was wonderful that he shared some of his political views on Facebook, and he was arrested, and he's in jail. I love Facebook. It gets us in trouble all the time. And people fight about things. But there's somebody who's watching those Facebook and some in our world, and they will snap you. They will grab you when they find out you have some political issues. So this is all. How do you deal with all these issues in marriages? Then you have kids. And some of you who worked in our part of the world, our kids are undisciplined. Any of you thought that way when you worked with the Arab kids? Am I saying something different? Maybe the Albanian kids will be the same too. You know, they are not disciplined. And they kind of the masters of the house. Whatever they need, we take care of it. I could tell you that I just met my daughter yesterday, and we had dinner. And man, I got some gifts for her too. It just, you know, you still have this cultural thing. But you build that relationship, but they really never been taught how to be a husband and wife. What is even marriage? Guess where I had to start with? Genesis. The worth of a woman and a man. From the beginning. I had to furnish the empty house with some who is a man and who is a woman. I don't think in America now we don't even know a Supreme Court doesn't even know how to define a woman. I'm not being political. I'm just saying that's a reality, that I cannot define who a woman is. And I could tell you, I've seen some definition. The issue here, biblically, they need to know who is a woman biblically. What is her identity? And many of the women really want to know what's their identity compared to the old identity. But here's another problem that's related to that. Well, when I was in the old religion, my wife listened to me very well. But when I became a Christian, she's freed and she doesn't listen to me. I have no control over my wife. How do you deal with that? Because now she feels she's equal, so she can say no. He has no domination over her. And therefore, she can disobey him. And she's been obeying him in the old religion all the time. Now, Christianity caused what? A rift in the marriage. I'm talking about real issues, folks. I'm not here telling you about books and things. I'm talking about some of the real issues that we have to sit in the marriage and to tell the woman, yes, you are free, you are equal to the man, but you need to understand you still have a role. You need to also love your husband, obey your husband. I know this is a taboo now in our days. Obey, it's taken out of things. But because we take it in the wrong way of obedience. And we have to work with them to be able to mend the marriage and help them understand what does it mean. It doesn't mean that you're free for everything. It doesn't mean it becomes anarchy when you become a Christian as a Christian wife. So all of these are issues. Then we have issues of rape, issues of violence. So a lot of time, part of the discipleship is trauma counseling. I had a Middle Eastern surgeon. She became a Christian. And she was prominent surgeon in the hospital. And when she became a Christian, her father and her brother raped her to destroy her. They also kicked her out of her profession. So now she's physically destroyed, emotionally destroyed, career-wise destroyed. Another one. I won't tell you what country, a German works in the German embassy in some place in our world, married a Middle Eastern woman who became a Christian. And they lived together for 2 years. He married the Islamic way, and then they married in the church. But then after 2 years, he found out that he has a German wife, which is forbidden by the German law to have 2 wives. We ended up having them be divorced. These are real issues, folks, that we deal with in the discipleship. How do you deal with a woman that she knows he's already betrothed to someone back, and it's illegal even in that person, in this country, to be married to 2 wives at the same time? But he did it. So he destroyed this young lady, and now we don't even know where she is. She left the country. We have no idea if she's still a Christian or not. So when I talk about discipleship, how do we deal with this biblically and counseling-wise to help them in their process of growing in relationship with Christ? Sometimes I play the image of the father, sometimes I play the image of a grandfather, sometimes the counselor. We have to play different roles with different people. I had one person, that one I usually don't do personal discipleship, but that one needed, because people kind of did not know how to deal with him, so I picked him up and I started discipling him via Zoom, because at that time it was COVID time. And he said, I used to be a very well-known man, respected, and since I became a Christian, I lost all my respect. Nobody respects me anymore. His identity in the community was altered. And yesterday they were talking about the relationship with the family and the relationship with the government and so on. So here you got an issue. He was such a prominent man, young man, and then lost all of that. One of the definitions that I like by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, that's kind of untraditional, is the cost of discipleship. I think some of you might have read it. I've actually never read it in English. I read it in Arabic. Because as I prepared for this, it was all in Arabic, not in English. And costly discipleship. One of the things that we have and really struggle with, some of you I know, I don't mean to be an anti-Baptist or anything, okay? That's not my issue. But sometimes we like to baptize people right away, come to the front, and we baptize them right away. People don't wait. I actually discourage people from being baptized right away. I mean, God could do that, and if He wants to do that, He can do that. I'm not God. I don't know His timing. But usually my wisdom is give them some time. Why? Because they need to know the cost of discipleship. We had some people who were baptized and then found out they're going to be persecuted for Christ, but nobody told me. When they told me I was going to get baptized, they never told me I was going to do it. This is going to happen to me, or that's going to happen to me, or I'm going to lose my job, or I'm going to lose my kids. Nobody told me about this. And they end up going back. So we need, when we disciple people, before we get into baptism, we actually say, hey, these are the costs. If you build, you know the song, if you built your house on the sand or on the rock, you've got to understand Matthew 10. What does it say? All the things that you could pay for being a disciple of Christ. All the issues you're going to go through. It tells you quite clearly, in Mark 10 as well, quite clearly that this is part of it. We need to understand that for those people to come to Christ, there's a cost to be paid. There's a cost to be paid. I sat with a man, he was sobbing because he ended up losing his wife and his children for following Christ. He missed his kids, but he had no access to them. We have another one that the grandfather went to court and took the custody of his grandchildren because their dad is a Christian. He cannot father Muslim kids, so they took him up. And we had to help him with his kids and his wife escape that country. It is not easy. Maybe in America it's easy. And I love those TV preachers. You know, become a Christian and all your life will be wonderful. And you'll be healed from everything. And everything will be great. For me, come to be a Christian, your life will be messed up. Will be upside down. That you may lose your kids. You may lose your marriage. You may lose your job. That is the reality we deal with. So I'm glad that nobody puts me on TV. This is part of the issues, folks. There is a cost to be paid. Are we helping people before they make that decision to be baptized and follow Jesus permanently to know those issues? Dietrich Bonhoeffer died for standing up against Nazi Germany and other pastors. He knew that. So when he wrote, before he died, he wrote about the cost of discipleship, and he ended up paying his debt as he died. He knew there was something like this is going to happen. Told people, this is not a cheap grace. This is a costly grace. That's the expression he said. Discipleship has a costly, the grace of discipleship has a costly price. So when we deal with people and disciple them, it is all of life with them. I have become a grandfather for many kids. And this is part of the thing I will talk about the next session. How much time do I have, folks? For those who have the time. Huh? 20 minutes. Wow. Can I bargain like an Arab for half an hour? You know, I lived in Spain, and they call it mañana. Okay? Mañana is what? It's tomorrow. If you don't get it done today, we can finish it tomorrow. even though I don't have a session tomorrow, but we still can finish it tomorrow. So it's not just an Arab, okay? Part of what we struggle with is the whole issue of time. How much time do we have to disciple? Well, I'm working and I can't do it at this time, but I can do it at that time. But you also have to work to deal with the time. If the person is in crisis, what do you do? There's a crisis in your hand. You drop everything. If you have a kid, don't you drop everything? We were in a trip, and my friend and his wife were together and having a conference, and their daughter had issues. She was just about to get married, but she had a change of heart, and she broke everything. So his wife ended up leaving us and went back to Canada to deal with the issue of her daughter going through problems before she even got married, and she didn't get married. So immediately she flew into Canada and changed all the plans. Sometimes this is what we have to do. Is discipleship a big part of our lives as well as a big part of their lives? We have to make that commitment. It is a commitment, folks. It is not every Thursday night, 2-hour Bible study, and here we go. That's the discipleship. We used to use, this kind of systematics. Every other Friday, we have our grow group, and we do a Bible study. After that, I don't care what happens to them. I have to wait for 2 weeks to find out what's going on. I don't call them. I don't check on them. That's not an issue. I actually do, but sometimes it can become annoying. I'm a menace because I keep saying every morning, "Good morning, folks. How are you today?" And some of them told me, that's too much. Just back out a little bit. That's, again, different cultures. But the time and the commitment, if you're going to be part of people's life, you need to spend time with them. We had a guy in the Middle East who led someone to Christ. And then when the family knew and they kind of kicked him out of the home, he went to the man's house who led him to Christ. Says, "I have nothing to do with you. I don't want to get in trouble. But it was okay for you to lead me to Christ, but it's not okay for you to host me because my family are looking after me and they want to kill me." You see what I'm saying about discipleship, folks? We bring them to Christ, but we're not ready to host a man and protect them. What kind of discipleship this is? Yeah, you can pay the cost. And this is part of the issue we talk about too. It's okay for the BMBs to pay the cost, but it's not okay for me to pay the cost. I just tell you, a big country in the Middle East said, "We're going to stand behind you. You come to the conference, we stand behind you." So they had the numbers, how many BMBs are attending, and they got some money for the people to come in. I mean, that's a business now. I call it the milking cow of BMBs. People are using it as a business to make money. I'm sorry, folks. I'm honest with you, and I tell you as it is. If you don't like it, I'm too old now to be fired. So, but this is the issue. So what happened? They went to the conference, and the police were standing outside. Everybody coming out in the bus. They go in the bus. "Give me your ID." Boom. The ID is not a Christian ID. You're in trouble. They went to jail. The person who led that group went to the U.S., blocked his Facebook site to all these people. And all these people end up going to jail. And they lost their home. Some of the refugees who were caught were kicked out. Even though they were married in that country and had children, they kicked them out back home to their countries. 3 marriages were destroyed because of this. And plus other people who ended up in jail and lost everything. Where was the church? Zero. Had nothing to do. They promised them. The senior pastor talked to them. "We'll stand behind you. We'll help you, no matter what happened." And when it happened, they disappeared. This is the reality. I'm sorry to tell you, but that's a reality we have to deal with. I just visited that couple, and they broke my heart to see what happened to them. And guess what they told me? "You come from America to come and visit us, and our people here don't even care?" This is the reality that we deal with. People's lives are shattered, and the church is nowhere to be found. Absentee church. Discipleship is costly. On the discipler side and the one who is being discipled side, not just on one side. Both sides have to pay the cost. If you're going to end up losing your job for leading somebody to Christ, let it be. God will provide. We're talking about discipleship. It involves a lot more things than just that. Being a grandparent, one of the issues of identity, when we become a Christian, our family doesn't want us, and guess what? I'm talking about the Middle East, not North Africa, because North Africa don't have this problem in some sense, because all of them are B&Bs. In the Middle East, you have Christians, and the Christians don't want us. So I'm right here. Those guys don't want me. Those guys don't want me. What are my options? I can go back and become back part of my family and forget about this, Christian business. But the Christians don't want me. What do? Where's my identity? To whom do I belong? So that's why we have to teach identity, and I'll address that in the second part. The identity, who am I now? Am I no longer this? Those are not wanting me. What do I do here? Now I left my family. I want to get married as a young man. So I like one of those Christian young ladies. Nope, you don't. We don't marry our kids to you. You see the issue? You still who you are. No matter you become a Christian, but you still where you come from. Yesterday, the person was talking about all the historical issues that happened for the Christians, and many of them don't want someone to marry their daughter because of all the issues. And there's some truth to it. And I'll talk about the kids. That's why when you're a grandparent, the kids go to school in some of my Middle Eastern countries, not necessarily in North African countries. And the reason is you have traditional Christians in the Middle East. In North Africa, you have no traditional Christians. There's only Westerners or French or European who are Christians and have their own churches. But the nationals are all coming from a different background. So the kid goes to school, and this is a true story, by the way. Usually, they call them by name, so the Christian kids go with a Christian teacher who are minority, maybe 5, 6 kids, and the rest of the kids stay in the main classroom to have their religious talks. And by the way, you have to pass in your religious education. That's part of the curriculum. So the kid says, I'm a Christian, so I'll go with the Christians. First grade. So the teacher yells at him, "What's your name?" It's such. Yeah, you're not there, you're here. But actually, the child grew up till first grade that he's a Christian. He prayed as a Christian with his family and everything. So he doesn't know what's going on. But his name is not, so therefore he has to go to that group. And then they make a mockery of him because he knows the Lord's Prayer. He doesn't know the opening prayer. Every kid, supposedly by the time they get to the first grade, they know it by heart. And then they start laughing at him. And then he developed sleeping problem and bedwetting problem. Because the kids were making fun of him. Nobody was accepting him. He didn't know if he's this or he's that. Identity, even for our children. I made a decision to follow the Lord. But why my children have to pay for that? From kindergarten and before. He goes to another story. And all of these are real stories, folks. I'm not a story writer, okay? These are all real life stories that I'm telling you. A kid went to they have a Christian family, that is his mom, and his dad from another family. So when he goes to his Christian family, they pray before the meal. That's what he was taught. So when he went to the other family, he says, "Why don't we pray?" Because grandma and grandpa are not praying. The grandpa blew up at him. "How dare you take this infidelity to our house. We don't believe in this, and we don't want our grandchildren to say those things. And the child had no clue what was going on. He just said, we do this here all the time at home, all the time on my other set of grandparents. Why doesn't this set doesn't do it? So the kid is confused. What is my identity? And you have to sit with him and say, well, this is what's happening. This is what's going on. I have 5 more minutes. Is that correct? Or my time is up already? 7 minutes. All right. All right. She decided it's time for Q&A. Here you go. You have 7 minutes for Q&A. She's the boss. I do what I'm told. I learned after 40 years of marriage. Yes, dear. Okay. Any question?
Wait. I'm going to give you a microphone.
We're recording those things, so you're going to get to be on the microphone.
Yeah, hold on. I'll give you the question.
Thank you for the mic. All right. If a Muslim becomes a believer in this area, like Grand Rapids, would you plug that person into a local church? Would you try to instead have a weekly Bible study with them? And if you plug them into a church, suggestions?
Well, we're comparing apples and oranges.
Sorry.
No. That's okay. Because in my part of the world, that's different to do that. Difficult even by law. You can't go to a church.
Right.
Okay? In here, you have the freedom. And the family could shun you even here and say, you should not go there. And you're not our son if you start going to be with those people. I usually don't want to bring them to church right away. I take them because when you have a husband putting his arm around his wife in the church and this guy is clueless, doesn't know what's going on, and he comes from a place where the women are separated from the men, so the whole concept of worship is screwed up for him. Okay, don't take what I'm saying as everybody have to be treated that way. When my sister came here, she said, I want to see, it's Christmas time, I want to see how the Christians do it. So I took her to this church, actually, when they had the Christmas celebration. But she asked for it. Okay? So again, I don't want to generalize everybody has to be standard cookie. And that's the American standard. First 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for every person who becomes a Christian. So you got to have, play a little bit, find out with the person how different he is. But usually I like to prepare them a little bit to understand what is the concept of a church. But I have to plug them after a while to a group of people, a home group, which is much easier to take and to belong to. Before I take him to a standard church and explain to him before he comes, this is what goes on in the church so they can understand. And also depends if they speak English well enough to understand or not well enough. But I still maintain, that's my prejudice, if you want to call it, that the BMBs need to have their own group that understand them from the same background, to meet once a month or every other once, to be able to blend together, to help each other because they understand each other. They can go to churches, other churches, but they still need some time for affirmation of who they are and talk about their issue with someone who's gone through the same. So I still believe not having them in church all the time, they can, but you still have some time to spend with them, with the people of their own. The problem comes here with the children. And this is a problem in Europe and in America. The kids are Americans. They grew up in this country. They understand, speak Arabic, okay, understand Arabic, but they can't read and write in Arabic. Therefore, if they're going to go to church, it has to be in English. That's just a reality. So which means if you're going to have a church for B&Bs, if you have a separate church, the kids still need to be taught Sunday school in English or in Dutch. In Holland, that's happening. The kids are Dutch kids. They might be Middle Easterners, but they're Dutch kids. You see what I'm saying? That's their language. They read and write and they sing. And they don't get into the Arabic music that is so wimpy. It is so minor key music. They like rock and roll. They like drums and so on. They grew up in Holland. So therefore, that's the kind of worship service that they feel part of, or the American service that they feel part of. So that's a generational issue. Most of the Korean lost their children because they forced them to be Korean and to speak Korean and to eat Korean and to worship in Korean. And the kids rebelled and didn't end up going to church. Hopefully that's enough answer. It's a big question. So we can talk some more. Any other question? Good. My life is easy if nobody has questions. You're a nice group. My students kill me. By the time I finish the class, I'm dead with all the question, the bombardment. Well, we'll see you next session. So thank you for coming.